Hello, and welcome to the Get the Power of Confidence Only with the GRE Revised General Test webinar. My name is Julie Schertz, and I'm part of the Global Client Relations team at ETS, which stands for Educational Testing Service, and we're the makers of the GRE test. The way it's going to work today is I'm going to walk you through a slide presentation just to make sure you have all the important details that you need to know about the GRE Revised General Test. As soon as the slide presentation is finished, we'll have a question and answer session. So I invite you and encourage you to ask any questions you have, and I'll be happy to answer them. Please keep in mind there may be some questions I may not be able to answer in order to protect the integrity and security of the test. So I hope you understand that. So the topics that I'm going to cover today are getting started. That's all about the registration process. What to expect on test day. So what happens when you get to the test center. All the important things you need to know about the test itself, such as what it's measuring, how long you have to take to complete the test, how it's structured, and so forth. I'll mention how you get your scores and how you share your scores to the institutions to which you're applying. I'll definitely mention test preparation materials, many of which are free, and I'll end by talking about 2 ways that you can strengthen or enhance your application for graduate or business schools. But first, 2 things that I think you'll be happy to hear about the GRE. First of all, it's used all around the world, so it's not just a test that's used in the United States, but worldwide, and it's one graduate admissions test that you can use for many different purposes. So you can use it for master's programs, to apply to MBA programs, specialized degree programs, doctorate programs, and even fellowships. The second thing is that scores are good for a full 5 years from the date that you take the test. So even if you take the test and you haven't narrowed down a program or even a field of graduate study yet, your scores will be good for 5 years and they'll be ready for you when you need to use them. But before we continue any further, I want to just explain what the power of confidence means. You'll hear me say that. That's even the title of today's webinar. So the power of confidence is something the GRE can give you in 3 ways. The first one I already mentioned, and that's that it's a very widely accepted test. So it's used for all kinds of graduate and business programs. So it can give you confidence by knowing that the test can get you where you want to go. It can get you into the program you want to get into. Second of all, the test has what we call a test taker-friendly design, and that means the way that you can navigate through the test screen allows you to skip answers, skip ahead, go back and change an answer, and this gives you the flexibility to use your own personal approach, which we think will give you more confidence when you take the test. And the last thing is that we have an option called Score Select. What Score Select does is allows you to decide which test scores you're going to send to the schools and institutions that you're applying to. So if you've tested more than once in the past 5 years and you have different sets of scores, you can pick and choose which ones you're sending to schools, and you can also have scores that you never want schools to see, and they'll never have to see them with Score Select. But first, let's talk about the very first steps, and that's getting started and actually going and registering for the test. It's a simple process. You would just create an account online at ets.org/mygre. You can also go to takethegre.com and click the Register Now button. When you go to register, you'll be asked if you'd like to participate in the GRE search service. And this is a free service that helps match you up with graduate schools and programs that might be of interest to you. So it's a database that graduate and business school recruiters use to find students. If that sounds like something you'd like to take advantage of, I encourage you to do so, and you can learn more about that at takethegre.com. Now, I get asked the question a lot, when should I register for the test, or when is the best time to register? And the answer to that is always early, but I know early means different things to different people. So ideally, you'd want to register about 3 months before the date that you'd like to test. And that's because registration is based on your location. So when you go to register, you'll be asked to put in your location, you can put in an address, a zip code, the name of the city, and you'll see a list of test centers pop up. You can click on an individual test center, and that will give you the dates and times that are available for the test. Now, we post this information about 3 months out, and so that's why that's the ideal time to register. As you wait, you'll find that test centers and times and spaces fill up. So if you go to register, let's say a week before you want to take the test, you might find that all the seats in your closest test center have already been filled. So now I want to share with you some important tips about registration. First of all, we have people taking the test all over the world, and there are different identification documents required at test centers in different countries. So make sure that you're clear on what kind of identification you'll need to bring to the test center on the day of your test. And you can find all of that information in the GRE information and registration bulletin on our website at takethegre.com. Now, when you sign up to register for the test, you need to make sure that the information you enter into the system exactly matches the information on your identification documents that you're going to bring to the test center. So don't use any nicknames, don't use initials or abbreviations, but your full official first and last name, or you may call it your family or surname. So when entering the last name, an important point I want to make is that if you have a last name with different segments or spaces or special characters, you would need to omit them when you enter your name into the GRE system. And this slide is an example. So you'll see the student has a last name with spaces and an accent mark, but he needed to omit those when he entered his name into the system. So just to reemphasize some points that I already made, make sure that you read carefully through the GRE information and registration bulletin before you register for the test. That way you'll know exactly what ID documents you need to bring to the test center. You'll also know about policies, like what happens if you need to change the date of your test, or what if something unforeseen comes up on test day and you can't make it. You'll find all this information in the registration bulletin. Now, I didn't mention this before, but another thing to consider about when to register for the test is think about the programs you're applying to and think about their application deadlines. Are you applying to more than one program? If so, look at the earliest application deadline and work backward from that date so that you leave plenty of time to prepare for the test, to register for the test, and to allow your scores to be processed. Now this is what the screen is going to look like when you create your MyGRE account. You'll notice that some fields are marked with an asterisk or a red star. The red star are fields that are mandatory. That means that you're required to add that information into those fields. The fields that aren't marked with a red star are optional, but we do encourage you to complete every field so that the admissions office at the schools that you're applying to will be able to identify you. Now again, make sure that your information that you're entering into the system matches your ID documents that you're going to bring with you on test day. If the information doesn't match, you may have an issue at test day, and you may even not be allowed into the test center, and we certainly don't want that to happen. So once you create your MyGRE account, please be sure to remember your login and password because you'll use that account for other purposes. So this is an example of what the homepage looks like every time you log in. And you'll see there's a yellow arrow. That's where you'll go to actually register for the test. So you'll click that link when you're ready to register. But you'll notice that you can do lots of other things through your MyGRE accounts. For example, in the quick links section, there's links to test preparation materials. There's links to the identification requirements. You can also manage your profile if your address has changed, if you need to update your email, for example. And also, this is where you'll go after test day if you wanted to send score reports out to additional institutions through the scores section. So just some tips for test day. One thing I would advise you is to leave early to go to the test center. Give yourself plenty of time to get there, just in case something unexpected happens, and then you'll still be able to make it on time. Also, you'll want to get there early so that you can have a few minutes to relax and not feel so stressed out. Again, check your ID documents before you leave for the test center. Make sure you have the required documents that you need to show in order to enter the testing room. Now I'm going to tell you all about the test itself, and I'm going to talk about the computer-based test because that's what most people around the world take. Computer-based test is taken in a secure GRE test center where you're assigned to a computer station, and you'll see the test questions on the computer monitor, and you'll answer the questions using your computer keyboard. The test measures three skills, and those are analytical writing, verbal reasoning, and quantitative reasoning. We call the quantitative reasoning section the quant section for short. You'll have one section of the analytical writing part, and that's where you'll be asked to complete tasks, and by that we mean two essays. So there's the part where you'll be required to write two essays, and you'll have 30 minutes to complete each essay. For the verbal reasoning section or measure, you'll have two separate sections. Each one will have 20 questions, and you'll have 30 minutes to complete each section. And for the quant section, you'll also have two sections. You'll have 20 questions on each section, and you'll have 35 minutes to complete each section. Now, for those of you who are math whizzes, you probably already added up the time and know that the whole test takes 3 hours and 45 minutes to complete. Plus, we do add some timed or scheduled breaks, and I'll tell you about that on the next slide. But I do get asked a lot about the order of the test, so let me talk to you about that. The analytical writing section is always going to be the first section of the test that you take when you get to the test center on test day. And that's where you'll write your essays. And then you'll have the remaining two verbal sections and two quantitative sections. Those sections can appear in any order. So test taker A, for example, might complete their analytical writing section and then have verbal, quant, verbal, quant. Test taker B might complete their analytical writing section and have quant, quant, verbal, verbal. So there's really no fixed order after the analytical writing section. Now you'll also have either an unscored or a research section on your test. Those do not count towards your final score, and you'll know if it's the research section because it will be clearly identified. The computer will let you know that it's the research section, and it's going to be the last section that you'll encounter. An unscored section, however, will not be identified. You won't know that from a verbal or quantitative section. And as I said, neither the unscored nor research sections count towards your score. So I mentioned you have breaks, and I promised I talked about it. So you do have a 10-minute break after the after the third section that you complete. And then you have a 1-minute break in between all other sections of the test. When there are scheduled breaks, the clock stops, and that way you don't lose any time to complete test questions. The clock does start up immediately after the break, so you'll want to make sure that you're back in your seat in time. Now you can take a break when it's not a scheduled break time, but you won't be able to stop the clock in that situation. That way you would lose time on completing the questions. So make sure if you take an unscheduled break that it's absolutely urgent. Otherwise, I would say don't take any unscheduled breaks at all. Now, you can use as much scratch paper during the test as you like. Scratch paper is just blank paper that you can jot down notes if that helps you during the test. You can use breaks to get more scratch paper if you wish. Now, scratch paper, just so you know, is collected and destroyed at the end of the test for security purposes. Why don't we dive in and take a closer look at each section, and I'll talk about the types of questions that you'll find. I'm going to start with the analytical writing section because, after all, that's the section that you start with. So the analytical writing section is measuring your critical thinking and analytical writing skills. So it's looking at your ability to reason, to assemble evidence, to develop a position, and to communicate complex ideas. And as I mentioned a couple times now, there are two writing tasks for essays. One will be analyze an issue, and the other will be analyze an argument. Analyze an issue is where you're going to be presented with some kind of topic or situation, and you'll need to write about how you feel about that topic or situation and why. Analyze an argument is where you'll be given somebody else's argument or feelings about a topic, and you'll have to write whether you agree, disagree, or feel somewhere in between, etc. Now keep in mind your essays are typed using the computer keyboard, and you only have basic functions available to you. So those basic functions are insert text, delete text, cut and paste, and undo a previous action. You won't be able to open up other computer applications while you're testing, so you won't be able to look up things like dictionary.com or thesaurus.com, and you don't have available through the computer things like autocorrect, spell check, grammar check. Looking at the verbal reasoning section, that measures basically your ability to understand or comprehend what you've read. And there are different types of questions you'll find on that section, and those are reading comprehension questions. So that's where you're going to read a passage, maybe a couple paragraphs or a paragraph, and answer questions about it. You're also going to find text completion questions. That's where you'll see a sentence with one or more blanks, and you'll need to select a word choice for each blank. And you'll have sentence equivalence questions. So that's where you'll see blanks in a sentence, and you'll have to choose words that would give the sentence relatively the same meaning. Now for the reading comprehension questions, there are different types of questions that you'll see in that section. So one is multiple choice, and that's just where one and only one answer is correct out of a list of answer choices. But there's multiple choice where there might be more than one answer correct. So that would be where 1, 2, 3, even 4 answers are correct out of a list of answer choices. And finally, there's select in passage, and that's just where you highlight an actual portion of the text itself to answer the question. Now, the quantitative reasoning section, or quant section, is really assessing your ability to interpret and analyze quantitative information and solve problems using mathematical models. And the question types include quantitative comparison, that's where you'll compare data, multiple choice, where one and only one answer is correct out of a list of choices, multiple choice, where 1, 2, 3, or more choices are correct out of a list of answer choices, and finally, numeric entry, and that's where you'll actually answer the question by entering a number into an answer box. I get questions a lot about the level of math that's contained in the quantitative reasoning section, and it's really just elementary mathematical concepts and basic math skills, including arithmetic, algebra, geometry, and data analysis. There is not any trigonometry, calculus, or other higher level math on the test. Now you'll notice in this slide there's a picture of a calculator. So there is an on-screen calculator available to you during both quantitative reasoning sections. That's on demand and you can use it if you need to. But keep in mind, you don't have to use the calculator to answer every question. And in some cases, you may be able to solve the question faster without the calculator. So don't feel like you need to use it there. Another thing that's really important for you to know about the verbal and quantitative sections are that they are what we call section level adaptive. And what that means is that the computer is going to select the level of difficulty of the second section of a measure that you encounter based on how you perform on the first section. So let me give you an example. I mentioned you have 2 sections of verbal and 2 sections of quant. So say you're on your first section of quant and you have 20 questions and you get 19 out of those 20 questions correct. That means you performed really well. So your second section of the verbal reasoning measure will be at a more difficult level. Within each section, all questions carry equal weight, or they all count for the same amount, and they all count towards your final score. And your final score is based on two things. That's the number of total answers you get correct in each section, as well as the difficulty level of your second sections. And there's a myth buster thrown in there. So I do hear test takers feel worried that they're going to get points deducted if they answer a question incorrectly. And I would like to state for the record that that is not true. You do not get any points taken off if you answer a question wrong. You only get points for questions that you answer correct. So it's always better to guess than to leave a question blank. Now it's time to think about your personal approach to the test. As I mentioned, there's different strategies that different people have. Everyone's different when it comes to taking the test. So some people like to go through and answer each question in order. Some people like to go through and sort of skim or read through all the questions and then go back and start answering. Some people like to answer the questions that seem less challenging first and then go back and answer the ones that were more challenging. So what's your strategy? You would be able to think about that and use whatever approach works best for you. And that's because of the test taker friendly design of the test. So I'm going to explain more about what that means right now. So no matter how you like to take the test, you can do that now with the GRE. It's the only graduate admissions test that has a test taker friendly design like this. But within each section, so again, I mentioned there's two sections of verbal and two sections of quant. You can go back and forth and skip ahead. You can skip all the way back. You can mark questions. That way you can flag them and know that that's something you need to go back and take a closer look. Basically, you can just navigate freely through the sections of the test, and that gives you the ability to use an approach that works best for you. Now, this is an example of the interface design that you'll see at the test center. This is what the real test will look like. And you'll notice circled at the top is a navigation pane or certain toolbars. And that's how you move through the test. So you'll notice there's a next arrow that allows you to skip ahead within a section. There's a back arrow that allows you to go back to a previous question. There's a button for the calculator, the calc button. That would be during the quantitative reasoning section if you need to use the calculator. There's also the mark button. So as I mentioned, if you feel that you're stuck on a question and you're taking too much time, you can always hit the mark button, and then you'll know that that's something you need to go back and look at, and you'll be able to find it easily when you go back. Now, what I didn't mention is there's also a review button. The review button will show you your progress in each section, and it will give you your status for each question. So you'll know if it's a question that you've answered, if it's blank, or if it's incomplete. Now let me talk about the calculator for a moment too. So you'll see that the calculator is a 4-function calculator. And again, it's only available during the quant sections, and it's available on demand when you need it. So it's not always on the screen, but if you need to use it, you just click the calculator button. And you'll see that this particular question here is an example of a numeric entry question. And I mentioned that earlier when I was talking about the quantitative reasoning measure. So this is a question that you would actually answer by entering in a number. You can either click in the text box and type in your number with your keyboard, or there's a neat little trick you can do using the calculator. So if you look closely at the calculator, you'll see a transfer display button. You can click that to transfer the number from your calculator screen into the answer box. So now I'm just going to give you some general overall tips and strategies that we think work pretty well for most test takers. So one is don't waste time on any question that you're finding very difficult. So if you spend too much time on it, you'll lose time to answer other questions. So it's better to kind of flag that or skip ahead and start answering other questions. And again, no question carries any greater weight than any other. Now I talked about the review screen and that it can show you your progress within a measure. And my advice for the review screen is to always use it at the end of a section, just to make sure that you really did complete all the questions, that you didn't inadvertently leave something blank or incomplete. However, don't spend too much time on the review screen. If you're constantly looking at the review screen as you go through a section, you're going to lose time that you'll need to answer the questions. Some more tips, and these are for the analytical writing section. It's a really great idea to prepare an outline, or at least kind of jot down an outline or topics you want to mention. This will help make sure that your essay is focused, and it will make sure that you don't forget to include any points that you wanted to. And I know 30 minutes isn't a lot of time to write an essay, but if you do have time after you're done writing your essay, just make sure you use that to go back and read through, because you can at least catch some of the small minor mistakes, like typos or spelling errors, or just quick fix things. So scores, I know scores are something that I'm sure you are worried about, and I want to talk to you about the score scale. So you won't get one total score for the GRE, but rather you get a separate score for each of the three measures. And the analytical writing measure is scored on a scale from 0 to 6 in half-point increments. The verbal and quantitative reasoning sections are scored on a scale of 130 to 170 in 1-point increments. So some examples of an analytical writing score could be a 3, a 3.5, a 4, a 4.5, etc. Examples of scores for verbal and quant could be a 130, 131, 132, and so forth. Now, getting your scores. First, you have the option to see your unofficial scores, and you can do this at the test center. So while you're at the test center on test day and you've just completed all sections of the test, your computer is going to ask you, do you want to cancel or report your scores? I look at this as having the option to cancel or not to cancel. If you choose cancel your scores, that means that neither you nor any schools or programs will ever be able to see those scores. They will never be available, and the test will never be part of your GRE account or your GRE history. It's almost like it's just been erased completely from ever happening. Now, if you choose report your scores, that simply means that you're going to keep this test in your history, and the next step is you'll be able to see an unofficial score for the verbal reasoning and quantitative reasoning measure. After you see your unofficial score, you can go ahead and decide if you wanted to go ahead and send scores out right then and there on test day. And by that I mean, do you want to go ahead and pick institutions to send your scores out, or you can not send scores out on test day. It's up to you. Now this is an example of the screen if you choose to go ahead and report, or in other words, to view your scores. And in this particular sample, this person got a 161 for their verbal reasoning and a 160 for their quantitative reasoning. Notice there are not scores or unofficial scores for the analytical writing section available on test day. Now, you're thinking, okay, well, that's my unofficial scores, but what about my official scores? Well, your official scores come in about 10 to 15 days after your test day. You'll get an email from ETS when your official scores are ready, and you can get them by logging into your MyGRE account. So I mentioned earlier, it's important to keep your login and password, and that's because you'll need to use it again in your official scores. Now, you can decide after test day to go ahead and send scores out to institutions. And as I mentioned earlier, you can do that through your MyGRE account as well. So now I'm excited to tell you what the GRE account will look like. So I mentioned that GRE scores are good for 5 years. And so anytime you take the test in the past 5 years, it will be part of your account, unless, of course, you decide to cancel the scores at Test Center. But if you don't cancel your scores at the Test Center, you will see them every time you log in to your GRE account. And this is just a sample. And in this particular sample, this person took the test 5 times in the last 5 years. So you'll see they have 5 sets of scores in the system. And each set of scores is listed by the date of the person who took the test. We call this account your reportable history. So that just means all the test scores you have that are valid are within the past 5 years. Now let me explain more what the score select option is. I really think that you'll like this. So with score select, you've tested more than once in the past 5 years, like the account that we just saw with 5 sets of scores. You would have the opportunity to pick and choose which set or sets of scores you send out to institutions that you're applying to. Or you can have a set of scores in your system that you decide you never want to send out to an institution. It really gives you the power and the control to decide if your scores are going to be seen or not. And Score Select is available whether you send your scores on test day or if you send your scores after test day. So the way it works is on test day, your Score Select options are you can send your most recent set of scores, so that would be from the test that you literally just took. Or you can send, if you have more than one set of scores in your history, all your scores to a school or schools on test day. Now, after test day, you have the same options with Score Select, but an additional option, and that would be to send any set or sets of scores out to an institution or institutions. So the glory of being able to send any scores are that if you just wanted to send one particular set of scores to an institution, but not your most recent, you would use the any option. If you wanted to send multiple sets, but not all, that would be your any option. Now, one other thing to point out is that on test day, you get up to 4 free score reports. So I would encourage you to take advantage of those free score reports and go ahead and send scores on test day if you're happy with your unofficial scores. After test day, you are no longer entitled to the 4 free score reports. So just to sum up, the Score Select option is a great way to give you power of confidence because that puts you in control of which scores you're sending. And if you take the test the first time and maybe you don't feel like it was your best, you can always test again and then send the scores that you feel reflect your best. Now, if you decide that you'd like to test again, we do have a test retaking policy. And that policy is you can take the test once every 21 days and up to 5 times in any continuous rolling 12-month period. So it's March right now. Let me give you an example. It's March. You could take the test up to 5 times between this March and next March. Now let's talk about for doing your best and being as well prepared as you possibly can. So test preparation items. We do offer test preparation items, and these are an example of some free test preparation that we offer. You can find all of these on our website, ets.org/GRE/prepare. The PowerPrep 2 software is free software that's available for Macs and PCs that actually provide you with 2 full-length practice tests. And they look just like the real test. It's as close as you can get to taking the test without actually taking the real test. You can take it using a timed mode or an untimed mode. If you do the test in timed mode, you'll really experience how the time is structured on the day of the test. So it's even a better idea of the real test. And if you do it in timed mode, you'll get unofficial scores for your verbal and your quantitative section, just like you do on the real test day. Now, for those who need some help with their math, we have the GRE Math Review document and the GRE Math Conventions document. Again, these are free on our website. Math Review is about 100 or so pages, and it's a list of the types of problems you'll see on the GRE test with sample problems and an answer key, so you can check the problems and check to see if you've gotten them right. Math Conventions is a shorter document that just goes over the conventions and assumptions and the terms that you'll need to know for the GRE math section. Now, we also provide test preparation items for purchase. We do our best to keep prices low and affordable. We have a series of videos called the GRE Success Starter video. One is an overview, that's the test maker's guide to doing your best. The other is just on the verbal reasoning measure, and the third is just on the quantitative reasoning measure. But these are great, really quick. Each one is less than 22 minutes. And it's a good starting point for somebody who wants a thorough but very quick overview of the GRE. We also have the GRE official guide. That's a book. It comes in paperback or ebook format, and that gives you a very solid overview of the test. It gives you sample responses for the writing section, and it has 4 free practice tests included. We have a mobile app for those of you who like to do things on the go. It's a great way to practice and answer sample questions while you're doing other things, while you're busy. And for anyone who wants extra help with the analytical writing section, Score It Now is a great way to practice. It lets you submit essays to the 2 writing prompts that you'll find on the GRE and gives you diagnostic feedback and suggestions for improving your writing. Again, you can find these all on the website, ets.org/GRE/prepare. So I just want to mention that we do have a GRE revised general test page on Facebook and on Weibo. And this is just a way for you to engage with other test takers, to hear from other people about to take the test, or maybe those who already took it. And so just to sum up the features that I talked about with the GRE, it's a great choice as far as a graduate admissions test because of its test taker friendly design that lets you skip ahead, move back, change answers, flag answers. We have a test taking policy where you can take it once every 21 days. We have score select where you can pick and choose which scores you're sending, and it is the one test that's very widely accepted by thousands of graduate and business schools all over the world. And I did mention in the beginning that I would tell you about 2 things you can do right in your application to grad school. So here it is. You can consider taking a GRE subject test. This is not the general test, but rather tests in specific fields of study. And you'll see those fields. There's currently 7 different fields. They're in the purple box to the right. These are to demonstrate achievement in a particular field, and they're administered certain times of year in a pencil and paper format. If you're interested in taking a subject test or registering for a subject test, you can do so at ets.org/GRE/subject. And we have something called the ETS Personal Potential Index, or we call it PPI for short. This is a way that you can have your non-cognitive skills or personal attributes in 6 different areas measured and sent to a grad school. And those areas are knowledge and creativity, teamwork, planning and organization, communication skills, resilience, ethics, and integrity. These skills have been chosen because this is what graduate schools have said are important skills for success and for perseverance in a grad program. So you can add this to your application materials to show more than just your grade point average or test scores, and show that you can be a good fit for a program through other ways. If you're interested in learning more about PPI, you can find it at ets.org/PPI. So finally, we do have a newsletter. If you go to takethegre.com/signup, you can get periodic tips emailed to you from the GRE program. So you might want to consider that if you're going to be taking the GRE. Now it's time for questions, and I want to thank everyone who submitted questions. The first question is the GRE test a compulsory test for students to apply for graduate school? Well, the GRE does not determine, we at ETS don't determine who requires the GRE and what scores they're looking for. That is all determined by the graduate schools and graduate programs themselves. So many graduate programs will require a GRE score, and there are some that don't. So my best advice is to narrow it down to the programs that you want to apply to, and make sure that you're very clear on what their application requirements are. You can usually find this on their websites, but if you about whether or not the GRE is required and what kind of score they're looking for, I would encourage you to contact the program and ask the admissions advisor. Now, the next question is, how much does the GRE cost? Okay, I had a feeling that would be asked. The current price of the test is 185 US dollars, and that's a global administration. So that means that it's the same price anywhere in the world. Another question I've gotten is, do I need the GRE for the JD? I guess that's a law degree, apparently. Again, whether or not you need to take the GRE is up to the individual program to which you're applying to. So make sure that you consult with your programs and the admissions office if you have any questions. Another question that came in is, how important are GRE scores in getting admitted to university? Well, we at ETS have guidelines for the use of scores that we give out to institutions that use GRE scores. And we always recommend that GRE scores be combined with other pieces of an application. So we encourage graduate admissions officers to look at more than just GRE scores, so your whole variety of application materials. With that being said, each admissions office or program will have its own requirements and its own competitiveness and their own GRE score that they're looking for. So really that's a tough question to answer because it really varies depending on the program to which you're applying. Another question is, I want to study in a foreign university, so what do I do? Well, again, I mentioned that the GRE is a test that's accepted all over the world. It's accepted not just in North America or in the United States, but worldwide. So it could be, even if you're applying to a foreign university, they may still look for a GRE score. So again, just make sure that you speak with the program you're looking to apply to about their admissions requirements. So another question is, this is one. Okay. So what if we have an alphabetical mistake in our essay? Can you please explain more about the essay? Okay. So the analytical writing section, again, is measuring your ability to construct an argument and use evidence to develop your point and just really to convey complex ideas. They're not as concerned with making a small typo or grammar mistake if there's one or two small mistakes in your essay, or just a couple small mistakes in your essay. That will not impact your score on the analytical writing section. However, if there's chronic and persistent grammar and spelling mistakes, typos, and especially if it interferes with the clarity of your essay, then it will have a negative impact on your analytical writing score. So another question here is, okay, so this question I think is saying, if there is the score select option, why would somebody want to cancel their scores on test day? And you brought up an excellent point. With score select, meaning that you never have to send a score that you don't feel reflects your best, there really isn't any real apparent reason to cancel your scores on test day. You want to think very carefully about doing that because even if you have a score in your account that you're not too happy with, you never have to send that out. So there really isn't too much of a reason to cancel your scores unless you absolutely feel that you really didn't perform well. For example, if you were sick during the test and maybe you didn't answer any of the questions, that might be a reason you'd want to cancel. Otherwise, it probably would be better advice to keep the score and then decide if you want to send it out or not. Another question is, if I send scores at the time of test day, but I'm not satisfied with that score, and I take the test again, and then, I'm sorry, I'm having a hard time understanding, and send the scores to the same 4 universities. Okay, I see what you're saying with this question. So can you test, send a score out, then take the test again, and send the scores out to the same again? You could do that. That would be fine, but it may confuse the recipient of your scores if they see one set and then another. So my advice to you would be, if you don't feel confident with your score on the day of the test, I mentioned you will get to see your unofficial scores and then decide if you want to go ahead and send scores out. If you don't feel confident about your unofficial scores, I would say it's better to not send the scores, to take the test again, and then hopefully get better scores and then send the scores out at that time. Okay, oops, sorry. Okay, I don't see any more. I don't see any more questions coming in that I haven't already answered. So at this point, I think we're going to go ahead and wrap up the presentation. I want to thank you again for participating and for submitting your questions. If you find that your question wasn't answered or you think of a question once the webinar ends, you can go ahead and email us at ETS. I'm sorry, I forgot. I'm sorry, at gre.ets.org. So I'm sorry, but I messed that up again. gre-info@ets.org. Let me say that one more time. ets-or-info@ets.org. Thank you so much for joining us today.